All right. Welcome to Inside the Grind podcast, the podcast for people building real coffee shops. Every episode, we sit down with someone who's deep in the day to day, hiring, fixing, worrying, making hard choices, and still showing up to serve. These are honest stories from founders in the thick of it. No fluff, no ego, just the real grind and what's getting them through. If you're building something on your blog, this one's for you. Brought to you by Coffee Futures Fund. Going back to a conversation about people reaching out to you a lot in terms of advice and guidance. What are the kind of questions that come up a lot that you feel that these are some of the patterns that I'm observing, something that people are doing right and something that people can do right, but they're not seeing it that way. What's the typical conversation?
Yeah, I think typically people want to look at the surface level challenges that they're having. And so whether it's like drink prices or, the pricing of their ingredients, or maybe they don't feel their marketing's having enough impact, or, their impressions on social media aren't what they hope they would be. And not that those are bad questions, but usually the issues are more foundational than that. I think regardless of challenges in the industry, whether it's the C market right now or whatever the challenges are, that even just the state of the world in general, people are opening coffee shops all the time. And I think when you're on an island, have this dream that you're trying to execute, you don't necessarily see the fact that there isn't enough clarity around who you are as a business and what makes you different from everyone else. And then really growing and developing those. I think we even self-check and make sure, like, hey, do our team members know like what makes us different and like where our niche is and like what are our company's values, and do the team believe them and live them. And I think even as a single coffee shop, like that is where you start. Like that is the most important thing because it's going to define everything that you do, including how you make financial decisions and how you set your prices. So, how you decide what syrups you're going to use in your cafe, or are you making them yourself? So it's really that defining the why. Who am I and why am I doing this? And is everybody that I employ, are they all on the same page? And there oftentimes is a lack of clarity around those things. We consult businesses that have been in business almost as long as we have, and they don't have those things figured out. And again, it can be one of those things where, and I'm saying this from experience, this was something that I discovered, that I was living the mission and vision. I was a living example of it. But when I wasn't present or engaged on a regular basis, slowly that would kind of start being watered down because I hadn't implemented a structure that made sure that that thing was being conveyed without me being physically present, right? Like if the business is only as good as a single individual to live out that mission and vision, then that business lives and dies by that individual. That's not sustainable. And so the value of a coffee shop truly defining who they are and what makes them different and why is huge.
Yeah, you shared a lot of tidbits there, which are really deep points to take note of, because you talked about both the things. One, having very clear understanding about who you're serving to, what your why is, and not just end at that, um, in the owner's mind, the operator's mind, but just practicing it through the team. So making sure the team is also aware and also dialed in and also practicing it on a daily basis. So my first question on this particular topic is, how do you define your why?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's a practice that starts with you as the individual, or I guess if you have a business partner, you would do this cohesive, together. But I think, really sitting down and asking yourself the question, like, what is the purpose of my shop? And why am I doing it? What am I trying to achieve with my customers? And, the answers that you get from that should be the lens with which you make every decision. So again, like how you're pricing things and, how you're choosing ingredients, those should all be filtered through your why. That you should be sending a signal to your customers that they know why you exist. Like, oh, they're here because they've created a really nice space for me to work on my laptop for 3 hours. There's lots of power, there's free Wi-Fi, Is that why you exist? Or do you exist because you work directly with a roaster and you're really excited to tell this story about why coffee from different parts of Colombia all taste unique to their sense of place? And those are two very different extremes. And there's everything in between. Maybe you're super passionate about local and creating an experience that highlights local businesses. And there's opportunities to create an infrastructure to do that in your coffee shop. But if you don't know, that's why you exist. And so part of it is, if it's your business, you need to ask those questions about why did I decide to do this? Because there has to be a component of all those things we were talking about earlier with those, both failures but also successes. You're not going to be able to see those things through if you're not achieving your why through that process, right? So I'd be lying to say that a lot of Madcap's values and a lot of the who we are isn't a reflection on the things that I'm passionate about. Like that's 100% what it is. And that's why I can have off days where it's like, man, why am I doing this? And then the next day I remember because there it is. There's the values. This is why we're doing it. And this is why I keep going.
I also think, Trevor, that it's also sort of difficult, right? Imagine a emerging coffee shop owner in this very competitive world and very social media driven world where two things come to mind which are sort of distractions but also
Mm,
realities in a way to your why. So
hmm
let me lay those out and tell me what you think. So one is there are so many shops, so many coffee shops around me, my competitors. So when I price things, when I offer things, I want to make sure that it's industry rate, industry standard. Simply speaking, price. I cannot
hmm
price my products out or in of it. I have to be in comparison in relative sense to my competitors. So that's one. So that sort of restricts how I operate my business. And the second piece is also the aesthetics. That takes a very different angle now because in a lot of cases, the first time people come across a coffee shop is through the social media, right? So they see, okay, what the shop looks like, or what's so unique or fun about it, and that excites me to go and explore that coffee shop in person. So it's about the look and feel on social media. Then, so now summarizing what I'm saying, I want to make sure that what I'm offering is in relative presence of my competitors, what they're offering. And the second piece is about the look and feel and the social media presence. Now, if I want to cater to those things, and how do I balance my why? Whilst
hmm
making sure I'm still there out there in the market.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think, yeah, addressing those individually. So, from a price perspective, I think one of the biggest dangers that new businesses, especially coffee shops, restaurants will make this mistake too. I've seen it a lot where, I've done consulting for shops where I've gone in and they're explaining their challenges and what they're trying to do. And one of the things I always start with is looking at, well, like, well, what are your costs? What are your margins on these things? And I'm shocked by how often they haven't really looked, they don't really understand their margin, but they know what their competitors are charging. So that's how they've set their pricing. And so it's interesting how often I would say even ourselves, even other industries, beer, cocktails, where if you understand the why you exist and you understand what your margins are, more often than not, like the pricing that we set in all our retail locations, yeah, I'll look at what everybody else is charging, but I'm confident in our product and the service we're trying to create around it, and we're charging what we need to charge for it.
Mm,
If I end up pricing things and I'm 100% more, that's maybe an extreme. If I'm 30% more than so and so down the street, and from a maybe a big picture perspective, on the surface, people might think, oh, those are similar businesses. Like that's
mm,
just another coffee shop. One thing that sometimes gets people in the door is like, oh, they're really expensive. Why are they really expensive? And people will go in to check things out because they want to prove that like these guys are overcharging. It shouldn't be charging this much. And
yeah.
so am I providing them the why in the sense of why my product is priced
Yeah.
the way it is, right? So it's always intelligent to know what are my competitors doing, what are the comps, what's the expectation in the community. But the number of times I've seen businesses failing because they've kind of just copied what other people are doing to a certain extent, both in price and then look, which we'll talk about. That was part of your question too. And it's like, well, if you're charging the same and you look the same, why are people going to choose you over anybody else?
Hmm.
And then to your point, you are 100% right in the sense that people's first experience with you might be digital. I mean, I'll look on Instagram before I look at Yelp to find out, do I want to go to this restaurant? Like, I'm not really interested in reading all the people complain on Yelp. I want to look and see, like, I can kind of tell from photos, like, does this look good? Did people tag them in something? And so to your point, the aesthetics of a place, the brand identity of a place, and again, is your why conveyed through that? I think, you know, it wasn't super intentional, but when Madcap started, the number of times I had people asking me, like, is this a chain? Where are there more of these? Because of how put together we looked, which most people don't expect that from a, mom and pop or a single cafe location. If it's put together and they have branded cups and really clean and intentional design, the assumption is this must be a franchise or a chain or something. And so that's another one of those things where I think a lot of folks, when they're starting up, they don't prioritize, not even just investment, just the intentional, thoughtful process of like, this is who we are. And how does the space tell people who we are? How does our pricing tell people who we are? How is our hospitality telling people who we are, defining the why, right? And I think those are things that, like, sometimes, again, like when you're in the weeds, you have the things that you're prioritizing, like, oh, we have to invest in a really nice espresso machine. Like maybe that's your thing, right? And like that's the thing that you're gonna put all your eggs in that basket. But you're doing yourself a disservice when you don't place the same level of intentionality, thought, or investment in those other areas, because then you're always trying to catch those other things up. It's the same issue of like, more often than not, coffee shops put their newest employee with the least amount of training at the register. So their customer service person. So the first person that is the first point of contact for every customer you have in your space, for some reason, is the least experienced, least knowledgeable individual that you have in that space.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so how do shops overcome this? Like, we are investing in a significant amount of training in hospitality, and we're not letting that individual work in that role by themselves until they've been signed off, in the sense of like, all right, you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to answer people's questions, to help get people what they want, to serve them best.
Yeah.
And again, it's another one of those things where you're in the weeds, whether you're just starting your coffee shop or whether you're a year and a half in, and you only have so much bandwidth as the owner. Like, I get it, right? And so you're kind of in survival mode. And so, I mean, even so, that even goes back to like the value of something like Coffee Futures Fund, is having this well of information and knowledge from individuals who have already been down that path and had that journey.
Interesting. So I have this interesting question that I want to know your take on, which is how do you see investment in coffee shop from Coffee Futures Fund? And the reason I ask you this question is, when we started thinking about Coffee Futures Fund, the why we want to do it, how are we really positioning ourselves? How are we here to support the community, the industry, specialty coffee, and still make it sustainable and profitable? One of the key things that in my mind was we are a fund, we are not just a fund, right? So that was a key differentiation because you have your sources in terms of venture capital, which is a totally different beast. The expectations and the reality is so different. There are bank loans and that investment route. Then of course family and friends, and then crowdsourcing and so many other different routes. So my question is, if an emerging coffee shop owner were thinking about seeking investment from Coffee Futures Fund, how do you see that as an owner operator? Why do you feel that Coffee Futures Fund is an interesting place that an emerging owner should look at for investment?
Yeah, I think, I mean, what you said, it's more than an investment. Because one, the investment you're going to get from Coffee Futures Fund in the onset, it's not going to be so significant that you're going to solve all your financial challenges that you maybe have in the moment. But even speaking to what I just said, like maybe there's, of your branding that could be cleaned up, and you tried to do some in-house, you had a friend do some, whether it's work on your website or whether it's social media or whatever that is. And there's a tipping point which, like, just a little investment can sort of elevate those things to another level for you, where then you can build off of, because you had all these other things to worry about in the beginning, whether it's equipment and inventory, labor, all of those that you're going to prioritize over things like meaning and other small investments that you could make. So you take that and then you combine it with a pool of knowledge and feedback from a mentorship board, and that can even support you in like, hey, how do I use this investment to maximize my capabilities and my opportunity for growth and setting yourself up for long-term success. I think that is where the opportunity lies, where yeah, it's more than just an investment. If you're just looking for money, yeah, there are plenty of places you can go to just look for money. And the real value comes in having financial support that is then also 100+ years of experience from individuals who have been down your path and been down your road and can speak into real growth opportunity and really charting the course for what success looks like long term.
Ripping. I'm really excited that we make it happen because sky's the limit. Honestly, the way we have the mentor board together, more than 100 years of experience that we are bringing on the table to support emerging dreams. That means a lot, especially at the starting stage of the coffee shop journey. What are you most excited about in relation to coffee videos? What excites you the most?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably take this away from our conversation already, but I love the opportunity to just share experiences and mistakes and things that I've had with others. I think part of what brings me joy and even what we do at Madcap and the growth that we've had is getting to live vicariously through others and in the different roles that we have. So it's like I don't get to work behind bar as much anymore. And so getting to see my staff in that capacity and when they're thriving and when I see cool experiences and things like that, like that brings me a lot of joy. And I think in the same way, getting to pour into someone else who is desiring and striving to go down the same path that I've been down already, and getting to share that experience and knowing how fruitful it was for me and how much joy that I had through that really selfishly gets me excited to get to see other people thrive in that environment. And if I can contribute to that and be a part of that, that's really exciting for me.
Love that. Love that. Love that. And so exciting. I'm saying, Trevor, honestly, being at the front seat of seeing all the mentors here and learning from them so much and how they're sharing their experiences is just life changing for me in general. So I'm super excited about that. Anything related to Madcap that you'd like to talk about? Want to talk about?
I think it's probably interesting how the paths that, Madcap, as we've grown, being that we're at 4 retail locations now with more in the works, hopefully. The path for growth is probably interesting because even as I've said to you before and I said earlier, I had no plans to have multiple retail locations when I started. It just or that growth happened organically, and part of it is even us as a company just even asking ourselves like where do we want to be, where do we want to go, where do we want to grow, what do we think we're good at. And I think when you're a coffee company, as a roaster and retailer, so roasting and having the cafe side of things, and it means that we have multiple revenue streams being direct to consumer and wholesale. And when you're doing all of those things, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, should we do this? Like, we roast coffee, we do a lot of R&D for the cafe. Maybe we should be doing these things, and I think we've gotten really good at making sure that we're asking the question, like, is this a distraction? Because I think as much as we've talked about like these other struggles, whether it's, recessions or pandemics, or maybe you're having labor struggles, or you're not seeing a lot of sales growth or those obvious challenges. There's also the challenge of like getting too many opportunities is a challenge, is a challenge, right? Do you take every opportunity? Like if you set yourself up to be a business that, this could be a chain, like when you are perceived in that capacity and you're executing things at a certain level, then you start to see all these opportunities, and it's hard to say no when you're trying to. Sometimes success is just like, well, this would add to our bottom line, so we'd actually be more profitable in this capacity. And so should we say yes to this? And so I think we've had years on and off where that added too much burden to the team. We were spread too thin. We didn't have an infrastructure for that. We didn't execute that very well. And so I think some hesitation, because as an entrepreneur, My hesitancy 15 years ago was like, oh, yeah, we got to get on this. Like, hey, we got an opportunity. Let's do this. Let's find a way to make it work. And I think there's a capacity with which, if it's just me and maybe I have someone else on my team or one or two other people on my team who they're built the same way and they can function like that, and you can make those things work. But when you start opening your arms to every opportunity and you start expecting more of individuals, where it's like, hey, those weren't the expectations when I took this role initially. So I think thinking about that larger impact in terms of how it affects your team, if you read enough business books, there's plenty of examples of businesses that have grown too fast that's led to their failure. And so, growing smart is a real thing. And I think for Madcap specifically, our retail growth, to be honest, has been small. I mean, 17 years, we've taken our time with that one thing more so than other things because it's so important to me. Like, I want the experience that people have in our cafes. I want the quality, the hospitality to be of a certain level. And so if we can't execute that, I don't want another location. Right. And so, and it's never perfect. So we're always trying to improve it. And I think, one of our priorities recently, more so than the coffee to a certain extent, has been how we're executing hospitality in our spaces. And it just always feels like there's room for improvement. And, there's what has become sort of the standard, the type of experiences that people have when they go into a cafe. And for some reason, quality has not always necessarily been tied to a high level of hospitality and a high level of service. And usually it kind of ends up being one or the other, where, a cafe prioritized their hospitality and the quality is like, it's not that great, or vice versa, which has kind of been specialty coffee's sort of MO, honestly, is that, like, the hospitality is not a priority. People are here to have really good coffee, some of the world's best coffee. So the barista really knows their stuff when it comes to extraction ratios and everything else as it relates to nerding out about the coffee, but they can't read body language, or they could care less about a challenge a customer down at the end of the bar might be having because they're focused on making that the best cup of coffee they've ever made in their life, right? So those are things where, again, like, we're just looking at what we do and how we're executing it, and always asking the question about how we could be doing better. And growth adds challenge to that. And so trying to be purposeful and thoughtful and intentional about that growth, and not just growing for the sake of growing or because you have so many opportunities being presented to you and you don't want to say no.
Yeah. Very, very well said. Because you're right. Focus is key. The art is in saying no at the right time. So I love that.
That's it for this episode of Inside the Grind. If something here helped, make sure to subscribe and pass it to another coffee shop or a friend. We all need each other more than we admit. To learn more or join the community, head to coffeefutures.fun. This movement is just getting started. Until next time, keep growing. Your shop matters more than you know.